Hey YouTube, this is Rest Music Park Fan 62. This is my review slash thoughts about Queen of the Ring. Now, if you don't know what Queen of the Ring is, it's a movie that just came out last week on March 7th. And this is about essentially how women's wrestling came to be today. Now, before I begin, I want to say this. This movie shows how women's wrestling felt at the time. So we're used to each promotion having at least 1 to 2 women's matches a show, but back in the day, there really wasn't women's matches. And the other thing is that so in today's day and age, we're used to WWE, AEW, TNA, etc. But back during this film, we had territories. And they were all under the NWA, mostly. So, and also wrestling at the time, to the most part, was like a carny type thing. So something you'd find at your local carnival, or a fair or something like that. Than what you see today. So let's get started. So it first shows off Mildred Burke and her mother going to this local wrestling show, and I don't know who the wrestlers were on it, but that's really not important at this time. But it showed that and Mildred wanted to wrestle. So at her family's diner, Billy Wolf, along with his son, came in for several days and ate. So Mildred finally convinced him to let her start wrestling. Now, Mildred Burke, who's played by Emily Brett Richards, was green at first. She didn't really have the proper training. So, and then Bill Wolf was played by Josh Lucas, and then his son is played by Tyler Posey, I think. So now, once Bill Wolf thinks she's good enough, she goes to the local fair. So during this time, she started beating some of the local people. It was like for 25 cents, you can wrestle her. So this is where we meet June Byers, played by Kaylee Farmers, otherwise known as Camille in AEW. And it was a competitive match, but Mildred Burke ultimately won. So as time went on, Mildred Burke started winning more and more, and the pay started getting better and better at this time. So this is where it starts getting interesting, because Bill Wolf started bringing in other people like Mae Young, played by Francesca Eastwood. As a little side note to this, I will say she looks a lot like Peyton List from Disney. But, so you never really got to see Mae Young wrestle a lot in this movie. But she did great just in her role as a whole. And then another one was Elvira Snodgrass, played by Marie. I'm gonna butcher this name. Agropoulos. Hope I said her last name right. If I didn't, I'm sorry. And then other women like Bertha, played by Cara Muno, and so Mildred Burke's first real opponent / feud was against Clara Mortensen, played by Toni Russell. You may know her as Toni Storm in AEW or when she was in WWE. At the time, it was determined that Mildred would put Clara over. So after the several in there, Mildred is like, "Where's my title shot?" And Bill Wolf basically got in a fight with Clara's management, and it went from there. So, in this as well, you had the NWA commissioner, played by Jim Cornette. So he was basically like, women aren't going to wrestle in the NWA territories. And so Bill Wolf was basically like, she's going to. So, also during this time, more women started to come in, once they got a fairly good roster at the time, they had their first black women come in. One was Ethel Johnson, played by Trinity Fatu, otherwise known as Naomi in WWE. And so at the time, this was during segregation. So when they went into a hotel to sleep, the hotel owner basically told the 3 black women they can't stay here. So Bill Wolf essentially bought the hotel out for the night, at least. While in this, Mildred Burke met Gorgeous George, played by Adam DeMoss. I hope I said his name right. So he essentially was putting her over, saying, how great she was and stuff like that. But then other women who was coming in during this time was women like the Fabulous Moolah, played by Mickie James, and Debbie Nicholas, played by Britt Baker. And then also Gladys Grillam, played by Deborah and Will. And they were putting women's wrestling on the map during this time. So they were selling out shows and such. Now, so this is where they came up with the first essential women's title and this was getting defended. But then in this, after a messy divorce between Mildred Burke and Bill Wolfe, Mildred Burke essentially made her own wrestling company at the time, so she agreed to split with Bill Wolfe's, and the commissioner for the somebody from the NWA was essentially like, we can't keep doing this. This is costing us money, etc. And so during this time, Mildred Burke was going through all this difficult stuff, like another divorce with Joe Jr., played by Galvin Casano. And it was hard on her because, she was trying to do what she can for her son, and the new wrestling company she founded. So, but at the end, it came down to Mildred Burke. And during this as well, Gladys was in a match versus June Byers, and she went over the top rope, and she started, twitching and kind of like having her head go like this and such. And everybody was concerned, so she went to the local hospital, and she essentially died from blood not going to the brain, as well as some tumor in her stomach exploded. So during this time, who was it? Mae Young got into a tussle with Bill Wolfe, saying what happened to her, or what happened to Mildred, or Gladys, I'm sorry, was his fault. He should have never let it happen. So finally we get to the end, and so there was a match between Mildred Burke and June Byers for the title, and essentially it ran out of time, and Mildred Burke stayed the winner. Now, I will say this as a whole. This movie, if you can watch it, showed just at the time how good and or bad that time period was. Because at the time, women were essentially like to stay at home, cook, clean, etc. But, they weren't in the wrestling rings. They weren't really in much sports at the time either. Outside of one of the shows, there was a protest, and you saw stuff like no high heels in sports and stuff like that. And it showed that just how far women's wrestling has come. The other big thing in this movie as well is the wrestling ring with the ropes, because at the time the ropes in this movie were like actual ropes and not like what they are today. Now I don't know about the mat, but this movie showed just how far women's wrestling has come. The acting in this movie is good. And if you can find it, I would highly suggest you go and watch it.